Hello, happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the Company Road podcast. This week's show is for all of those that want to do more good work that they do in one way or another. And as entrepreneurs, we're often wondering about the impact we can make, the teams that we work with, for the companies we work with, for ourselves. But also today, we'll be talking about ways in which we can impact the society in which we live, and the community and the wider planet. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce my next amazing guest, Sarah Kaur. Very warm welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, good. And Sarah, you're a strategic designer, human-centered design researcher. Really looking forward to hearing about some of the work that you do. And you're currently a design thinking practitioner at CSRIO's Data 61, where you're focusing on research, responsible AI, some of those things, embedding human insight into machine learning, and you undertake AI research, product development, and some really cool stuff just applying that technology. You've got a bit of background in more business analytics, but also in fine arts. And you spent your incredibly successful career supporting nonprofit, government, and private organizations alike. Welcome to the show. I'd really love to just hear about some of the things that you've done. Tell us a bit about your journey and how you found yourself in this position where you're bringing together the worlds of analytics. Maybe a bit of art, but maybe not.
Thank you, Chris. That was a really awesome introduction. I think how I got here was definitely, like, if I look back through whether it's been being interested in arts or being interested in digital production and what transformation means in an organization context or human-centered design or artificial intelligence, I think the through thread is just being incredibly curious about the creative potential that happens between humans when you are given like a meaty enough problem. So whether that's doing a community arts project where they want to tackle an issue that's like close to their heart, or whether that's in an organization wondering about, well, what is a good use case for AI now that everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, and how do we do that responsibly? And right now in my role at CSIRO, I work in the engineering and design group within Data 61. So I'm lucky enough to be working with data scientists and software engineers who have been producing a lot of the original research around safety guardrails and the evaluation of good practices around AI ethics, and how that is implemented and governed in practice. And so that's a really meaty problem, and it doesn't not touch anyone. It's very multidisciplinary. And so right now I'm just very immersed in that facilitation of creative collaboration to tackle a critical and emerging issue.
Amazing. I mean, that sounds so cool. I think the title Data 61 says something in itself, right? It feels like that's a top secret organization doing some clever things, you know?
I haven't found out why it's called Data 61. I really should.
No, I mean, it just sounds like a code name for something that people shouldn't know about, but maybe there's amazing work going on. What's some of the stuff that's keeping you busy at the minute?
We've just released a report, like an interim report with some initial findings around what investors might want to pay attention to when they're looking at a sector or a company, but they're looking not just, I guess, at the financial considerations, but they're starting to look at ESG. And now there's AI. This report kind of documents some findings from thinking about an ESG plus AI framework for investors to consider. So a lot of it's around identifying material use cases of AI in particular sectors, identifying good management practices that leads to responsible use, whether that's thinking really strategically about AI, as well as managing it right from a policy, compliance, and regulations perspective. So that's been released, and that's exciting. The other thing that's keeping me busy and really like focused and interested is the idea of an AI, I'm doing like quotes with my hands, an AI footprint. So the idea is similar to carbon and how we've developed an idea of a footprint. How do we start understanding the external impact of the way companies use artificial intelligence in their systems, in their supply chain, in their workforce, on consumers? And so I don't think footprint's going to be the name of the concept forever, because it implies that it's a negative thing that you want to reduce. I think the idea is that actually artificial intelligence offers us amazing opportunities to do great, like to have a good, positive net impact. but the framework there is aimed at ASX companies a minute, and it's trying to encourage them to think about impact at the board and CEO level and not kind of tunnel into the internal governance mechanisms, but that space that's really nebulous of impact. What is it? Impact evaluation. What is that? And so developing all those metrics and ways to have a conversation around it has been keeping me busy, if not up at night. So
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure. It feels like that sort of awakening around AI and using it as an enabler, particularly in the last 12 months, I'm going to say where it went mainstream. I know it's been around for a long time. Machine learning's been around for a long time. But it just feels like that sense of possibility is very present. Everyone's very aware of it. You're probably finding the conversations within organizations are a lot easier in and around AI, the acceptance around it, the fact that, we can all use it for good. I'm wondering, in those areas that you described, to what extent it has really been an enabler from the point of view of assessing different data sets, probably, and then really understanding how it can translate into meaningful outcomes. You mentioned impact, but if you were to describe how AI has been an enabler in your world, what would you say?
Several facets, right? So I think I've been thinking and kind of talking with other design practitioners for the last probably 12 months around specifically Gen AI, specifically, with the release of ChatGPT, how that has started to be integrated into design team workflows. And so I think where we've landed is that it's an amazing tool that helps. For me specifically, I find it really great at generating speculative scenarios that I couldn't have come up with on my own. So how I've been using that, for example, is if I'm preparing to go into a co-design workshop, what I might do is take a concept and I might work with GPT to kind of push that concept into a few different variations and then take them into the co-design workshop to say to real people, hey, look, this is one concept. These are a couple of different ways it could play out. And I am pretty transparent. I'll be like, I generated this with GPT. This is inspo material just to kind of broaden our thinking together about what shape this solution might take. And now it's time for us to kind of do our own thing. And I find that that's useful. It's useful as a tool to generate, I guess, ideas that are honestly more diverse than I could have come up with as a solo practitioner. But it's also useful to take the output back into the human realm of co-design, but also acknowledge the presence of GPT, because what I'm finding is some people are starting to get worried with online and remote co-design workshops. Are my participants generating input themselves, or are they also going to GPT? Are we in some massive recursion loop? So it's almost like saying, look, we're in this together. The point is that we're humans, that you've got rich experiences and that you're here for a reason. We've already brought GPT into the conversation. It's an enabling tool for us to move on with together. So it's almost like recentering the value of that human participation and perspective. That's one way.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, just on that point, it just feels like we as humans, we're kind of biased by the way things have always been in a way. It feels like we've always been in these sort of meeting, workshop-y type scenarios, particularly the corporate environment, organizational environment. That's run a certain way for a long time. So it's actually introducing something like GPT, generator for ideas. It feels like a bit of a cheat. But actually, if you think about echo chambers, the echo chamber was always there because you were in the four walls of your own organization talking about the stuff and the assumptions that everyone had already, using the data sets that everyone had, they've been peddling those things for a long time. And it was always resulting in non-breakthrough thinking in a way. It was always resulting in a confirmation bias of what you already had there to begin with in one way or another. And so I think the advance of GPT and the advance of AI is actually giving us the opportunity to more easily access an outside point of view, because research and user testing is obviously a little bit daunting in some people's cases. It feels like you have to get that over the line. You have to business case it. You have to budget for it. You have to spend lots of money and time doing it. So I think in terms of generating ideas, probably more qualitatively, I'd say to begin with, it's quite a good way of just bringing new points of view in And arguably, it would be probably more wide and varied, like you were saying, than what you'd be able to come up with in a room full of 20 people anyway. So it might just start you at a higher level than you were able to begin with in the first place. So has that been your experience?
Yeah, no, and you made so many interesting points there, right? Like around diversity or divergent thoughts being, it's a tool to help us kind of get beyond the people in our in our little world. Because it's true, no matter how carefully you try and curate the people who come into your workshops, there's inevitably a level of bias or limitation. So I have found it really helpful, like you've said. I do think it's worth looking at where I draw a line on where I won't use like GPT for example, for synthesis and insight making. I think there's several reasons for that. Maybe some of it is like really old school thinking. I'm like, what do I value about myself? I value my immersion in a content area, or I value my human kind of perception of who was in the room when we recorded or got outputs or got kind of interview raw details and commentary. And I don't find that when I've tried using GPT to summarize or synthesize a lot of information, I kind of feel like it takes it to the lowest common denominator. And it's not great at unpicking the tensions or the insights in a dialogue, in an interview. So that's something that I still prefer to do myself.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with that. One of the areas that you did just say was around ESG in particular, which I feel has been talked about a lot, but in a way quite loosely defined. And I'm wondering how you found the experience of using AI, or maybe not using AI, but how you're trying to evolve the conversation around ESG in a sense, and what's been useful in that regard.
I think in the conversation around ESG and AI, what we've been finding is that it's really early days for most companies to start thinking about how to get signals back from their use of AI. There's clearly sectors or specific companies and tech startups where that's a very clear value proposition and it's attracting a lot of investment money. But then there's, really established companies where they are starting to integrate AI use cases. I would say in Australia, they're still mostly internally facing, and we're still a little bit hesitant. And maybe that's a wise thing to deploy external use cases, like consumer-facing AI use cases directly. But the trick is, if we think about the ESG journey, and again, we look at the environment and look at the massive journey that we've had to go on from looking at carbon usage and then scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, I found it really fascinating to go, gosh, like we did get there. Those are really complex areas to try and wrap your head around. And now as investors and as company kind of directors and leaders, it's part of the conversation. We're not allowed to not have that conversation. What I really want to encourage investors to do is hold companies to the same degree of accountability when thinking about AI. And what's really interesting is that because it's such early days, I think the potential for conversation and behavioral change and accountability can really be driven by the investment community asking smart questions. So in the framework that we're developing, I guess we're trying to give investors a little bit of a sense of how AI might interact with existing ESG components. So is it a degree of the materiality of risk is increased because the scale of what could go wrong or right dramatically increases? Or can it be thought about as part of an existing category? So we might think about the use of AI as part of tracking your environmental electricity or carbon usage, but there are also areas that are distinct that we need analysts to be able to kind of go, oh yeah, I do need to engage the company on how they're managing a technical governance process for AI. That might be new.
Before AI, there are always ways in which organizations would set up their systems and processes and all of the ways, the policies basically, all the things that would surround an unknown topic with some level of safety, and people would understand how to engage with it and what to do. Is this something from having to now bring AI in that has been a sort of close precedent in the way that it's been set up or run previously?
I think this is interesting because I don't know if there is one answer in terms of a precedent. I think there's probably been several tools like that in the past, but this is I think the level of power that consumer facing Gen AI offers with such intuitive accessibility for such essentially a low cost for that high powered tool, like that's pretty unprecedented. But I wonder if we should spend a bit of time talking about the idea of like shadow AI or shadow Gen AI. Have you come across that concept?
No,
Yeah.
tell us about that. Sounds cool.
Well-
Sounds like something you do at Data 61. It's very, very covert.
Yeah.
Once more. Yeah.
Great.
Let's talk about shadow AI. Yeah.
Nah, shadow tech in general.
Yeah.
It's not been approved by IT. There's not necessarily yet a policy of use for it. You might just be using it in your personal life and it might bleed over into your professional life. But the idea is it's kind of hidden from the perspective of your corporate governance process, policies, and environments. What we do know is that tools like ChatGPT and others are being used by plenty of employees around corporations. And what I wanted to do was think about it less as a massive risk and think about the opportunity that it brings, right? Because I feel like you'd be familiar with this in your org design and strategy work. It's like employees really know a company. They know the company values. They know their job really well. They know their workflows really well. And what you could do is kind of go, not only do I have a workforce that knows me and their job and is really competent, but I also have a workforce that needs to be upskilled in AI. And I also have a fair proportion of people that I can assume and should assume are already using it. Oh my God, I've actually just got a leveled up workforce. How do I make it possible for my workforce to say, yeah, turns out I'm using Copilot for this and it's amazing. I'm doing it like 10 times faster. Or turns out I'm using GPT in my personal kind of capacity and I've worked with it and I've come up with a more efficient way to design like this process. So maybe it's less about saying slap on the wrist, don't use it, don't shadow AI. Maybe it's kind of saying, tell us about all of these creative things. And that's a really great way to move forward into the new kind of upskilled workforce.
It reminds me a little bit about a previous episode that I recorded with Max Callis. I think you know him from your time at Portable as well. He was talking about his time at Lloyd's, the fact that he set up this Dead Pony Club, which is all about innovation and basically creating a safe environment and an okay environment for these types of thoughts and experiments to actually exist and flourish. I think creating the acceptability around it is the start and making that sort of a known phenomenon that people can actually jump in and use it, and then setting even just very loose or basic guidelines around it to begin with will give people that level of comfort. Because I think the first step is a really important one, particularly with AI. It's really about taking that leap into experimentation, into the unknown for the first time, where you're experimenting with a technology that you've never used before, but you're also thinking about how you like to work, but also how personally you would like to use it as well. So that's part of it. And then I was coming on to say that the part that is problematic maybe is around tech adoption more generally. And it feels like there's always going to be a leading cohort where they're way ahead and they want to get into it. And there's always going to be a lagging cohort that want to know that it's a bit more safe and established and see that other people are doing it before they would jump in themselves. And I think in an organizational capacity, that presents quite an interesting problem. You're talking about AI being a really amazing leveling tool, really, around how to create equitability. And it's like an egalitarian way of working because everyone's got access to the same stuff. It was like when Google first came out and you could just search things up for the first time. Now there's AI or ChatGPT and people have all got access to the same things. So that presents a newer opportunity because if it's easy to use, then actually it does become flatter. And it's not just about tech adoption and some people knowing how to code and other people not knowing how to code. It's actually something that everyone can use. So yeah, I'm just wondering within that context, whether you feel and have seen that can work a lot more effectively, particularly with this advance of technology. And is this going to be the way in which tech developers now continue to surface, do you think?
Oh, I'm really torn on this one, Chris, because I think a lot of the people that you and I will work with, either as our clients or our peers, will have no problem accessing it. But there are huge parts of our population where the digital divide has already existed for very many years. And I think this probably will kind of accelerate inequitable outcomes, which is really worrying. But it's not even just about, do I know about the tool? So it's not just about awareness. It's not just about connectivity. Like, do I have a way into the infrastructure that allows me to access this? It's almost about the capacity to imagine how to work with a tool that is of the Gen AI category, to dream big and be able to do the thing that you want to do. So as part of there's like a story by Lorraine, the Australian Human Rights Commissioner, and she was making us aware that in schools, the rollout of Gen AI has been really interesting, because she was observing that in like private schools or schools in suburbs that are high socioeconomic kind of status group, students are doing things like using GPT to do coding projects or to help them kind of get ideas for how to launch a robot into space, and like amazing. But then she was hearing anecdotes about students who are in different kind of circumstances in different kind of schools, and the questions they were asking GPT were like, can you write my resume for McDonald's? Or like they're kind of constrained in, what is my goal, what is my ambition, and I'm going to use the tool for that. So there's all kinds of layers of inequitability in terms of access, but imagination and capability. And so I don't know how to get on top of that, but I think that is a very good challenge that the design community in Australia could kind of lean into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I want to make a wild leap now into your background, which is around art and creativity, because I think there's some interesting things to explore here around that very point, which is to do with the fact that you can have all the tools at your disposal. You know, you can have all of the paints, all of the acrylics, you know, you can have the finest 300 pencil set, Derwent pencils, right? But not everyone can do the same things with it. So yeah, from that point of view, it is limited in a way by the possibility that you see. And yeah, just on that point, we think that it's pretty popular now to think of innovation or creativity as something that can be taught rather than is probably within you, within your nature as you're born. There are lots of frameworks for lateral thinking. We think about all the amazing corporate innovation frameworks and things that exist and people use very frequently now. But what we're talking now about is not necessarily a framework that's prescribed like that, but it's something that's much more open, and it would diverge and it wouldn't be limited by your capacity. So in a sense, it's probably more like using paints or pencils or Lego or something, as opposed to having a fixed kind of creative playground and an expected way of working. So how do you think people are going to deal with that?
Oh, it's a big question. I mean, I think your portrayal is right. Like it's a toolkit, right, of colors or palettes. I think it's kind of also maybe up to educators. If I'm thinking about like school children or us as parents, I'm kind of thinking it might be up to us to, in a way, try to demonstrate the breadth of what at least we know to be possible to our kids and to even our colleagues, and say, hey, I've been trialing this thing, or check out this kind of quick experiment. Because what I'm finding a lot now is that it's quick to make prototypes with Gen AI. It's quick to share them. And then there's this moment where people I've been working with, like my colleagues at Data 61, might show me something and I'm like, whoa, how did you do that? You did that really quickly. I've got a very similar use case. I wonder if I could learn that thing from you, or even reuse some of your tooling and code and do that for myself. And the next level up is saying to others, hey, I built this thing, it's on this link. Go and have a play yourself. I think it's maybe a combination of demonstrating, I don't want to say the art of the possible, just demonstrating what we have been trialing and kind of putting it forward as like, this is an experiment, not a finished product. Like, can you go have a play and see what you think? I've been finding that inevitably that leads to a creative moment for others where they're like, oh, you can do that. Well, I've been thinking about this. I'm going to do that thing as well and share it back with you. So I think we're in this moment of like creative exchange with it.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about other parallels. You could see it in the world of marketing, for example, where marketing practices and expression of creativity through that medium has taken many twists and turns. And I think the familiarity within that industry of other people's work, but also how propositions and brand and layers upon campaigns and experiential thoughts and activations and all of that sort of stuff. It kind of evolves based on familiarity, really, because people see that somebody's done that. Okay, well, there's a new technology. We can bring it together with this idea and we can then do it. So I think there's a degree of like peer-to-peer comparison, really, that makes it familiar and then safe, and then it's out in the world. You've got to be able to see it to be able to do it. And even us, we're probably quite frequently in talks and webinars and at events where people are talking about the possibilities of AI. And you've got to assume that we're in a minority group that really, not a lot of people know really about the possibilities of this or are using them day in, day out. But it's going to get to that point. So it's going to be interesting to see what people can come up with. It's a bit like TikTok or Instagram or anything like that. It's then handed over to the masses and we can take it on. There'll be people that soar and just do amazingly creative things with it. And then other people that choose probably to leave it behind and not engage with it. So
yeah, it's huge. It's such a, I guess it's like one of those classic, like, this is a disruption technology.
Yeah.
Speaking of marketing and brand and stuff, I was speaking to a friend who is a brand and content kind of strategist. And I was saying, hey, are you worried at all about like your job changing in a way that you don't like? And he actually offered that companies are coming to them now to say, hey, I really need you to write 200 examples of very well written on brand copy about a variety of topics. And I'm going to take that and we're going to feed that into like our large language model, like knowledge source, and train the AI to kind of do that in future. But he was saying, actually, I would do that at the moment. I would produce that kind of examples or templates about how to use a brand voice. I'd just be doing it for human copywriters. So it might not be human, but actually the role and the expertise that I need to bring doesn't really change. And that brings up so much for me, right? I'm like, oh gosh, like what is that? What are all the layers between those of us who have skills and expertise that can, for now, be used to train AI? Like what happens to the workers down the chain that might be displaced? But I'm generally really hopeful that it's a matter of going, okay, if that's happening, what is the human value that I bring to my job? What is the nuance that I bring that is unique to me, my experience in being human? And how does that become present in my role? I think it's going to be a real meaty challenge for us.
It will be, yeah. I mean, that's the next layer of self-awareness where you'll basically compare yourself to an evolving technology that's moving so fast that you don't know what you're comparing yourself to in a way. It's really hard.
So existential. It is. I was going to say, do you have anything where you're like, I will not use AI in my design workflow for this, or because it's not good, or because I don't trust it, or where are your no-goes at the minute?
I think the one that you mentioned around synthesis and the process, like the insight generation, it feels like that. Obviously, you can use it for that. But it's like, I remember times at school where I was taught how to summarize things in an English lesson. Right? You have to look at a chapter or a piece of work, read a chapter of a book, and then you say, well, what are the key themes in this chapter? And you've got to bring all that. And that's a process that's taught in itself. But everyone's answer to that might be slightly different. The fact that, it is being used to kind of force very base connections, you're right, it's down to the base level, it's down to the common denominator and almost the safest way. And the work that I do is never really in that realm. It's more, how do we look for unpredictable patterns, really? I'm looking for quite a clear hierarchy of information that evolves from very base data, raw data, into something that's a bit more clustered, a bit more groomed, observed as a theme. But then looking at a constellation of themes and how all of that works together and what it then means. And I'm actually trying to break theming more than I am group things naturally as a way of bringing new thought into that process. So I'm struggling to think how that could work from an AI point of view. And obviously you can train it to break things too, but it's almost the counter to what you're trying to get it to do. in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, I hear you, because I guess if you think about the large language model, it's really trying to predict the statistical next most likely phrase or word fragment, and you're saying, actually, in my job, it's about not just going to the most intuitive or predictable kind of sense making. It's actually looking for those almost like jarring moments of insight and then making sense of that.
Or unexpected pairings. You think about in innovation, you can spend a lot of time looking at trends, or you can spend a lot of time looking at successful service products or business models, and you strip it right back to what the mechanical the model is that sits beneath that. And then you compare that with something else. You can either create the sum of those mechanics to create something fresh, or you can bring in, if this was the mechanic, but it's only works in financial services, what would it mean if we applied that to a social enterprise or another scenario, not for profit? Or how can you bring the learnings through from other places to essentially solve for the problem that you're trying to solve? And I think that sense of connection, it just feels like it's wildly unpredictable at the minute anyway. Maybe the machines will be able to do that too. What do you think?
I mean, I definitely think it is really wild and really unpredictable, but I think there's something in what you said that made me, I guess, want to reiterate that even if it's not like a wild use of the technology, but like something that we might consider quite familiar and basic, such as summarization. I think one of the cool things about the way I'm seeing organizations adapt and employ large language models is when they take a foundation model, they point it at the internal kind of corporate knowledge sources, and it becomes a knowledge management tool. And going back to equitability and access, if you think about what that means, like all of a sudden it's not Chris or Sarah who is a knowledge holder, but it's kind of like a web of, it really is like the next level of intranet and a way to query an intranet that I think is pretty amazing. If you think about who should get access to what knowledge, that's a hard, both technical problem and kind of data governance problem. But let's say that all of a sudden more people can query more things in a more intuitive way and have that kind of corporate knowledge. I think that's quite interesting. I think that's also quite interesting when you think about really under-resourced organizations like not-for-profit, and you think about all of the traditional administrative, accounting, or other knowledge management system burden and maybe what that could offer, even if it is just, hey, you can ask a question, you can pull from a trusted knowledge source, and it will come back to you in a summarized form. That's a pretty compelling use case, I feel. It's not too wild.
Yeah, so putting definition around it obviously helps. It's like a packaging. It's like productization of what's there, because you could say, this is the use case, this is the product. It's kind of like, it's not ChatGPT, which is basically like this scary panel that you've got to put things into and you don't know what you're telling it to do, but it's actually framed up. So do you want this? Do you want that? I think Canva Magic does a good job of that. If you've seen that, it's basically an AI application for filling in all sorts of useful things brought into that under that banner. So you can get it to do some pretty cool stuff from a design, from a writing point of view as well. Now, I think that context feels like it's important for people to be able to adopt it at scale.
Absolutely. The context of application is key. I think it's key to everything, and it's most of all key to trusting how people use it and trusting how I can use it for the benefit of like my stakeholders or people. I think that one of the biggest fears that I still have, even though I feel very much immersed, is having a terrible impact, or could I accidentally be being influenced and I just didn't even know it, and now I've got a biased opinion just because I've been interacting with this. So there's always a part of me being like, if I zoom out and come to your earlier point around, even if I had 20 people in the room, still kind of a limit. We live our life immersed in bias, and I think a lot of my recent thoughts have been, how do I make peace with sitting with my bias, but also kind of going, bias does not have to be a limiting factor. We can acknowledge it, be aware of it, but sometimes bias is good. I'm trying to work with that as a concept more too.
I mean, it's a very interesting area, particularly with chatbots, just as one example. But if you're thinking about how it's set up and the fact that because it's tech, it feels like it's now encouraging a competitor landscape with more rival, it's like Google and Bing or Yahoo. People will use different things for different purposes and they'll get different things out of that. And to your point around creating the source of truth, where does the source of truth lie and who's going to win in that race? And it feels like some people will center themselves in one area and other people center themselves in another, or maybe not at all. And that's going to fragment knowledge essentially because its application is going to be so varied. So is it going to get really tribal?
Maybe it will get tribal. I mean, arguably we're already in a very tribal social bubble environment in general. At the other end of the spectrum, I don't know if it's any better to have like one view of the world either, right? Like one knowledge source for everyone to draw, and that's kind of scary too. So I have no idea. I feel like this is entering the realm of philosophy very quickly.
It is, yeah. It's funny how so many of these conversations go that way. I was talking to Marco, Dr. Marco. He's a data analyst, data scientist, but also he's got a doctorate in philosophy as well. And it's kind of the mixture of philosophy and fact and what's truth. And, it's a very good conversation. But yeah, it's in those sort of themes. It's sort of like what it all means. We're thinking about the world of business today, and there's going to be paths that people are going to have to take. It feels like consciously or unconsciously, you're either aware of your choices or you're just sort of led into them. If you join a company and say you become an entrepreneur or you're part of that culture, and a lot of it is sort of dictated to you. And, if there's a cultural possibility, then that's great. But sometimes there is a culture of impossibility where you feel like there is constraint. You can't really work around it. So these discussions we've been having, I think, are really interesting from that point of view of actually being able to push, even on a very small level, like summarizing text that we were talking about before, like very small use case. But that sort of thing could be incredibly efficient in some organization processes, but actually becoming aware of how you can use it, it'll become easier. So from an entrepreneur's point of view, what are some of the things that you think you'd encourage people to probably try out as a way of getting onto the journey of figuring out what they can do with it and how it's right for them?
I reckon there's a tried and true question that you and I would probably ask a lot of people that we work with. And the question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? But now I feel like the magic wand is almost at our fingertips. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm starting to develop workshops to identify use cases for AI that basically are like, describe your current work. And then at each point, yes, tell me about the pain points, tell me about what you wish was different. And often what people wish were different is something quite achievable with an AI tooling, assuming that you've got infrastructure and good data governance in place. But I think there's a follow-up question as well, which is, if you had the magic wand, what would you do? If AI was doing that for you, what questions would you have about the AI? What would you need to be able to work with it confidently? And are you worried about anything? And I think if we are able to ask the magic wand question, but a few follow-ups that really center on the relationship between the human and the AI tooling, we're going to get a lot of signals back about, like, this is how we should use it, but also this is how we need to take ourselves along on the journey. This is how we need to design, I guess, like principles into the way we use it, either in policy or guidance or the interface itself. And I think the cool thing is that it doesn't need to be executives. It doesn't need to be cross-functional teams. Like an entrepreneur could sit there solo almost and do that exercise and hopefully find a little wedge where they can say, hey, I've been thinking about this. Could we try this? And I really hope that all the business kind of leaders are starting to really want to keep their ears open and reward or incentivize that kind of thinking.
That's a really valid point around transformation and what can be made possible if some of those steps really are knitted together. Because what I see in the world of transformation, organizational design, culture change, that we're looking at is really that so often, and I'm going to say it's like 95% of the time, there are standalone initiatives or activities that are run in workshops and it's almost done in isolation and it's always removed. It's very focused on a particular task or an outcome, but it's never really that well connected to the implication for the business more broadly or the connection to the strategy or the vision more broadly. It doesn't ladder up. It doesn't have a consequence and it doesn't step naturally into action. So what I'm hearing from what you're saying, which is fantastic, is that previously there was probably quite a heavy bias towards strategy and leadership and governance and all of the things that focus on getting the course right, the path that people are taking within their teams. But actually what this is creating is the possibility of a much more granular set of steps that will result in action. So it's creating a bias for action rather than a bias towards strategy, which I think is going to be helpful. It's going to help in maneuverability and, in businesses and how they need to respond in the world of change that exists today. That's going to become much more important. That feels like a good thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think there's still a massive role for leadership in being explicit about how they want to steward that change and steward that transformation. So I guess it's like classic what does leadership mean in terms of setting the sights of everyone to be traveling in a direction with appropriate guardrails is such an overused term at the minute. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of like everyone, we're heading there. If you're in the red zone on either side, like, come back in.
You're out.
But within that, you're out. Like, within that, there's an amazing spectrum of possibilities. And, you know, in the Cynefin framework, how there's like in the complex space, one of the things you can do is start to like probe and sense. I kind of feel like the opportunity in companies is every single person is probably already probing and sensing. How are you going to listen for the signals about what's happening and then use that to influence or at least interact with the strategic direction that you're setting?
I also think that the hierarchy of an organization is going to be challenged. There's also a massive move towards a flatter collaborative structure within a number of organizations.
Tell us more about that. Tell us what you're seeing there.
Just in terms of practice around the evolution of a business or practice around the evolution of a product or a service, where no particular team or discipline or departmental lead or leader even has the answer or the direction. It's part of the evolution of the company, and you almost owe it to the teams to be able to involve them in some ways. So the co-design of the future blueprint or the product or the service is actually better figured out together in a number of cases. And that doesn't mean you have to invite everyone, like the hundreds and thousands that come in, but particular points of view just gives diversity of perspective, and it kind of involves people at the right time. But that has to be engineered in a way. So I'm thinking that there's a step towards collaborative, flatter structures. There's obviously a tool set that's coming in around AI. And I reckon there'll be a sort of hierarchical identity crisis of sorts where some people are using the tool, some people are not. It's more about maturity of usage really within this tool set. And it's going to be interesting because two people inputting is ChatGPT. One's a CEO, one's a grad. How does that sort of resolve? Is it that my input was better than yours, or my experience is more valid? And how will that play out? Because in theory, if all of these inputs are going into the system from an AI point of view, the truth that comes back will become probably more rounded based on everyone's opinion in the end anyway. But yeah, it just feels like in the beginning, it could cause attention because if you've got access to the same tools, anyone can look at this definition on Google and compare it to that definition on Google. It'll be the same with AI and the ideas then follow. So yeah, it could cause a heated debate, I reckon.
It could. It's also interesting around not just where is the source of truth that the AI might be trying to draw from, like what is the information that it's trying to prioritize. But I think like coming out the other end, there's a very necessary and as yet no established best practice of auditing the output. So who gets to say what the information is as source of truth? That's one. But then who gets to kind of qualify or validate the output on the other side? Is verified, is trustworthy, and maybe that still requires that same nuanced thinking about should there be a hierarchy where before comms go out and it's Gen AI, like I still assume that lots of companies are practicing a quality assurance process, and there will be the equivalent of what is the Gen AI output that still needs the CEO's like eyes across it and goes, yes, I'm willing to step in and be accountable for that output. Because that's huge.
Yeah, and it's around confidence, it's around risk. What are you taking on when something else is giving you the answer, or a contributing fact or some element within the solution that you're creating, because it's not attributable to your people alone is the point.
Yes. And oh gosh, you know what? This makes me so worried about the role of like management consultants.
Yeah, okay, go on. I was going to mention McKinsey, but go on.
Well, I guess putting everything aside apart from just like what is the role of the service of a management consultant, if you think about it, like we ask questions, we try and do enough research, quant qual background, competitive kind of scans. We try to develop insights and recommend strategies and pull kind of multiple perspectives together. But really, if all of that is in one place already and anyone anywhere could be like, tell me what you think my next 3 strategic priorities should be given everything you know about my company, because I've fed it annual reports and you've also got access to like all of my, I don't know, like financial documentation and strategy ideas. Put that together with 5 trend reports from the internet. What do you think my priorities should be? And AI could do that in a minute, and we would take like 2 months and cost so much more. Like I think that's quite a compelling prompt for us to think about what we need to do really, like what do we need to focus on to retain our value to organizations.
Yeah, what should we do? I don't know. What should we do? Maybe we leave it there.
What should we do?
No.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah. I wonder whether the OpenAI is obviously one thing, but whether more proprietary way of running it, from a machine learning point of view, will become easier as well. If you're a large supermarket and you had your own data set and you didn't want to just learn from the whole world, but just learn from what you fed it, to your point, you could just put your consultancy papers in through the letterbox at the front of the robot and it would just then provide you with the details after that. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Is you could actually create a closed system whereby you do maintain control of it in some way and it's still giving you that, certain capabilities in any case. Do you think that's possible?
Not only possible, but practical, and probably we're going to just see a huge uptake of that next year or sooner. Like, I really feel like we're going to see that being enabled, not because you're getting like a service provider or a vendor. Like you won't have to, I'm speculating, but I think very soon we won't have to get AWS or Microsoft to help us create that infrastructure. Like, it's going to be a very consumer facing kind of thing to set up your own instances and knowledge sources.
Yeah, awesome. All right. We're on the verge of technology just being really unhealthy. Do you think it's still healthy or is it just getting too far now? What do you think?
I am still enjoying using it, and I don't think I'm a complete hedonist. So maybe personally, I think it's still healthy, because what do I consider healthy? It seems to integrate with like my practices in personal and professional life. I feel like it allows me to do more of the things I'm interested in. What about for you? Is it healthy?
I think it's right over the edge. I think it's getting to a point where it's probably not. The possibility is basically a drug. You can find yourself doing more and more, trying to do more and more with it because it's so exciting. And if you're if you love technology, then that's where you can end up. It's hard to have personal constraint when the possibility is basically the payoff, and it can give you so much more. I was watching there's a documentary on ABC last night about the Australian workforce, and you know how ABC loves to just cut together bits of stock footage. It was kind of different interviews, different points of view, and they were talking about the workforce, and most of the stock footage was kind of people staring at laptops, people staring at computer screens. And the points they were making were around productivity, around how people were doing amazing things at work. But if you take a step back from that, what you're seeing from the outside is just hundreds and thousands of people just staring at computer screens for most of the time that they have in their days. So, if you compare that to Wall-E and the scenes that you see in that, it's not that different. So I'm just wondering about when and how people will get taught how to moderate some of this for themselves.
That is really interesting. And I mean, I can relate to that a little bit personally, right? Because I have just said I think it's healthy, but if I reflect on my last kind of month of late nights, I've been working with GPT trying to force it to make a dance film for me. Like a script for a dance film, and then now I'm trying to kind of like make it, because I can't draw. I don't have give me the beautiful Derwent pencils, and I couldn't do anything with that.
No way. You got the fine art degree. Yeah.
I know. It was all just like sculpture and photography. I was like, how can I get through my degree without drawing as much as possible? And you're right. I'm like, I have been feeling like I've been enabled to do a little bit of creative output, but I also haven't been sleeping before 2 a.m. most nights. I wanted to show you something that I don't, can you see that? We should describe it.
Is it hosted? Is it a link? I could probably put it into that.
Oh yeah, true. I'll give that to you. It's an image of an experiment I was doing as an artist about maybe 10 years ago. And it is black box, but it's building on the camera obscura idea. So basically a box, you've got on one side a pinhole that lets light through. On the other side, you've got a flat plane that collects the image. And I started thinking about basically making really lo-fi ones. So putting a massive cardboard box over your head with a garbage bag. You put a pinhole behind you, and in front of you, because you're wearing this box, you are needing to navigate the world just by looking at the image that is projected from the pinhole camera behind you. And it's a fun exercise. Like, it's a very fun kind of embodied experience of black box thinking. And I hadn't really considered it until very recently about, I wonder if this actually has an application in helping, like an artistic facilitation of helping people think through what black box means in an algorithm, or what it means to have a view of the world drastically filtered and have to navigate it anyway?
That's a great open question. I think there's some interesting thoughts around that, where it's a bit like any kind of content platform where you're asked about your preferences up front, and then you're served things in relation to that. You could say, well, I want to be living my life within these constraints from a tech point of view. And then the preferences could be what you control, but you could say, well, I want to shut off the rest because it's not important to me. So hopefully that level of preference probably does exist right now, but it's not controlled by a lot of people, I don't think. It's like, I'm all in. I'm going to see it all. Because I don't want to miss anything either. I want to see that it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but I'll make my own mind up. But we can't consume at the same rate, I don't think, for many more years.
No, we can't consume enough.
It feels like we're just going to burn ourselves out and nobody will be happy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and maybe we record another episode in the future where some of these things are developed a little bit more as well. But hey, Sarah, I've really loved having our chat today, and it's been super interesting just seeing where the conversation will go, touching on themes of obviously data, privacy, AI, creativity, many, many things. Yeah, it's just been fun. So thank you very much for your time. Is there any kind of piece of advice that you'd want to end on in terms of how people within organizations can navigate some of the things that you've been able to navigate in your work?
Yeah, it's very basic, but creating healthy and respectful containers for conversations with your colleagues is probably the thing that I've been anchoring myself in, because it could be a conversation about whatever, like interpersonal work styles, about ways of working. It could be around how you're taking and receiving feedback. It could be around how you're using artificial intelligence to do part of your work. But I think there's something around being able to lean into that humanness and interpersonal relationships and kind of say, hey, how do I have a really healthy conversation about this topic? Because what I'm seeing more and more is that we're having lots of remote meetings. We're having less kind of interactions, and we're starting, I feel like I'm observing more of a transactional kind of relationship happening between colleagues and workplaces. And I'd like to encourage us to be aware of that, and maybe where we can get a bit deeper. And that's really meta. It's like kind of a complete different track from the rest of the conversation, but I've been thinking about that lately.
Yeah, it's around balancing, isn't it? And you can use technology very prescriptively, and you can be down several rabbit holes with that at once, but it's finding the time to almost withdraw, step back, reconsider, reconnect with things and people, place, the things that are important to you.
Exactly. And to your point, like have those healthy limitations around technology and see others as a source of energy and don't burn out.
That's it. Maybe AI's got the answer for how to manage some of that too. We'll find out. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Sarah. And yeah, if people want to reach out with a question, or if they want to just find out more about the mystical world of Data 61, how would they get in touch?
Probably LinkedIn is the best way. So Sarah Kaur, and I'll hop a link through.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and share this episode with your friends, team members, leaders, if you think it'll make a difference. After all, we're trying to help you, the entrepreneurs, kick more goals within your organizations. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show, please email me directly at chris@companyroad.co. I answer all messages, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And to hear about the latest episodes and updates, please head to companyroad.co to subscribe. Tune in next Wednesday for another new episode.